There is an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that most people have never heard of. No native population, no tourism, no civilian flights. You cannot book a ticket there. You cannot even find it easily on an ordinary map. The people who once lived there, nearly 2,000 of them, were forcibly removed by the British government in the 1960s so that the United States could build something the world had never seen before. A base so remote, so secret, and so strategically positioned that no adversary on Earth was supposed to be able to reach it. It has supported American wars from Vietnam to Iraq to Afghanistan. It can host B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. It holds the fuel, the weapons, and the infrastructure to sustain combat operations across entire regions at once. It sits almost exactly where geography becomes power in the dead center of the Indian Ocean, within reach of the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa. This island is not just a military base. It is a launch point for empire. American officials have called it an all-but-indispensable platform for global security operations. And on Friday morning, Iran fired 2 ballistic missiles at it. Neither missile hit. One malfunctioned in flight. The other was intercepted and shot down by a U.S. warship. The base is intact and operational. But that is not the story. The story is that Iran fired those missiles at all because Diego Garcia is 4,000 kilometers from Iran. And until Friday morning, Iran had a self-declared limit on its ballistic missiles of 2,000 kilometers. Iran just fired nearly double the range it admitted it possessed. And if Iran can reach Diego Garcia, then it can reach something else, something that nobody in Washington or London is saying loudly enough. It can reach Europe. Before we get to that, you need to understand exactly what Diego Garcia is, because most people watching this have never heard its name, and they need to grasp what Iran just tried to destroy. The base is home to roughly 2,500 mostly American personnel. It has supported U.S. military operations for 5 decades, straight from Vietnam to the War on Terror to the current campaign. In 2008, the United States acknowledged that it had been used for clandestine rendition flights of terror suspects. Last year, the U.S. deployed several nuclear-capable B-2 Spirit bombers there amid an intense airstrike campaign targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels. 2,500 personnel, nuclear-capable bombers, clandestine operations spanning half a century. This is not a support base. This is the crown jewel of American power projection in the Eastern Hemisphere. Diego Garcia is part of the Chagos Archipelago, a chain of more than 60 islands, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, off the southern tip of India. Britain has controlled these islands since 1814, when France ceded them at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. In the 1960s and 1970s, Britain evicted as many as 2,000 people from Diego Garcia so that the United States could build a base there. 2,000 people removed from their homes, their island erased from civilian maps, their culture and their community destroyed so that the United States could have a base so remote that no adversary could reach it, until Friday. Bloomberg's own words describe what happened next. Iran launched ballistic missiles at the joint US-UK military base in Diego Garcia, demonstrating a weapons capability that goes beyond what Iran was known to have possessed. Beyond what Iran was known to have possessed. That is not my framing, that is Bloomberg's. Iran just showed the world a weapons capability that the U.S. intelligence community did not fully account for. And the implications of that revelation stretch far beyond one remote island in the Indian Ocean. The technical details of what Iran actually used matter enormously because the missile tells you everything about what Iran was really demonstrating. Israeli military officials said the attack involved the launch of a 2-stage intercontinental ballistic missile. Justin Bronk, a senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, said the attempt may have involved an improvised use of Iran's Simorgh space launch rocket, which could offer greater range when used as a ballistic weapon, though at the cost of reduced accuracy. The Simorgh is Iran's space launch vehicle. Iran has been developing it publicly, framed as a civilian space program, but the same technology that puts a satellite into orbit can be pointed downward to deliver a warhead anywhere on the planet. Iran just pointed its space rocket at the most secret American military base in the world. Jeffrey Lewis, a distinguished scholar of global security at Middlebury College, told CNN that Iran was developing an intercontinental ballistic missile, a program that was officially reoriented toward space launches after the Supreme Leader Ali Hosseini Khamenei personally imposed a 2,000-kilometer range limit back in 2017. Khamenei imposed that limit in 2017. He is now dead. The man who imposed it was killed on February 28th, and within 22 days of his death, Iran fired a missile at something 4,000 kilometers away. The limit died with Khamenei, and the new Supreme Leader, whom analysts had speculated, might be even more committed to Iran's weapons programs than his father, has now answered that question, not with words, but with action. Now we arrive at the part of this story that is causing quiet panic in NATO capitals right now, and which deserves to be spoken out loud. Iran itself claimed the strike demonstrated capabilities for long-distance attacks, noting that Diego Garcia lies at the same distance from Iran as much of Central Europe. Sit with that for a moment. Berlin is 4,100 kilometers from Tehran. Paris is 4,300 kilometers away. Warsaw is 3,400. Rome is 3,100. Iran just fired a missile 4,000 kilometers. These are no longer theoretical ranges. They are demonstrated ones. Trita Parsi, the co-founder of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, told CNN that the attempted attack suggests that other bases the U.S. thought were outside Iran's reach, along with American ships that had been deliberately kept 3,000 kilometers away, may now all be within range. He added plainly, it does put certain European bases within Iran's range. The NATO installations in Romania where U.S. refueling aircraft operate, RAF Fairford in England, from which B-1 bombers launched strikes against Iran, the bases in Cyprus, all of them now fall within the demonstrated range of a missile program that removed its own self-imposed limit the moment the man who imposed it was killed. American aircraft carriers and supply ships were deliberately positioned 3,000 kilometers from Iran because commanders believed that was a safe distance. Iran just demonstrated those ships may not be safe either. And Parsi added something that should stop everyone cold. The unsuccessful strike on Diego Garcia raises serious questions about whether Iran may have other weapons we did not know it had. For 22 days, this war has been fought on the assumption that the intelligence picture of Iran's military capability was roughly accurate. Friday morning shattered that assumption. Iran has at least one weapon system that U.S. intelligence did not fully account for. The question that nobody can answer tonight is, what else does it have that we do not know about? Now, Britain, because the timing of this attack created a political crisis in London, unlike anything Keir Starmer has faced since taking office. Here is the sequence of events. Iran fired missiles at Diego Garcia before the British government had publicly announced that it was authorizing the United States to use British bases for strikes on Iranian sites involved in attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran was already targeting Diego Garcia. Then Britain officially put it even deeper into the war by announcing that authorization. Iran's foreign minister responded directly. Starmer is putting British lives in danger by allowing UK bases to be used for aggression against Iran. That is the Iranian foreign minister threatening the United Kingdom, not America, not Israel, Britain. A country that has tried to stay on the margins of this conflict. A country that refused to let its Cyprus base be used for offensive operations. A country that has been carefully calibrating its involvement to avoid becoming a direct target. And yet Britain condemned Iran's reckless attacks after the failed strike on Diego Garcia. Reckless. That is Britain's official word. Starmer subsequently spoke to the Cypriot president, reiterating that RAF Akrotiri would not be used for strikes on Iranian missile sites. He is drawing lines. This base is for defense. That one is for offense. This one is off limits. He is trying to be partly in the war without being fully in it. Iran is responding by targeting every British asset in the theater, regardless of those distinctions. On the same day, Iran fired at Diego Garcia. Something happened in Israel that nobody is connecting loudly enough to the rest of this picture. For the first time in this entire war, Israel's nuclear research center was targeted. The town of Dimona, near Israel's secretive nuclear reactor, the facility at the heart of its undeclared nuclear program, was struck. Israeli officials confirmed that interception attempts were carried out before the strike. Initial footage showed a bus with its windows blown out, heavy damage to several buildings, and dozens of firefighters and police responding to 2 separate impact sites. 4 people were seriously injured, including a 4-year-old girl. 29 more were lightly injured. 2 nuclear-adjacent targets, one in the Indian Ocean, one in the Negev Desert, hit or attempted on the same day. Iran is no longer fighting this war only in the conventional military dimension. It is sending a message about what it considers legitimate targets, and a country's nuclear research center is now on that list. Meanwhile, analysts are quietly noting something else. Russia and China are most likely providing the targeting intelligence that made the Diego Garcia strike attempt possible in the first place. Iran does not have sufficient satellite coverage of the Indian Ocean to generate its own targeting data for that area. The coordinates, the tracking, the precision required to aim at a remote atoll 4,000 kilometers away. That intelligence had to come from somewhere. A conflict that began as a U.S. Israel operation against Iran is now a war in which Russia is feeding targeting data and China is potentially providing components. This is no longer a 3-country conflict in any conventional sense. And then there is the gap between Washington and Jerusalem that has never been wider. On the same day that Trump said the United States was getting very close to meeting its objectives and was considering winding down military operations in the Middle East, Israel announced that its attacks against Iran would increase significantly in the coming week. The same day. Supposed allies. The same operation. Trump says winding down. Israel says escalating significantly. Trump subsequently issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran through Truth Social, warning that the United States would strike Iranian power plants if the Strait of Hormuz was not reopened. That ultimatum expires tonight, and as of right now, daily transit calls through the Strait of Hormuz have fallen to nearly zero, down from highs of over 120 transits per day earlier this year. The waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil has essentially stopped functioning. Iran's answer to Trump's ultimatum came through its foreign minister, who announced that Iran is ready to facilitate passage for Japanese vessels through the strait. Japan can pass. America's allies cannot, not until they negotiate directly with Tehran. Iran is now selectively opening the world's most important waterway by nationality. If you want your ships to move through water that runs along Iran's coastline, you negotiate with Iran. Not through Washington. With Iran, this is where things stand tonight. Iran fired 2 intercontinental range missiles at the most secret American military base on the planet, twice as far as it ever admitted it could reach. One was intercepted, one malfunctioned. Neither hit. The base is operational. But the capability has been demonstrated to the entire world, and it cannot be undeclared. The range limit that Khamenei imposed in 2017 died with him on February 28th. His successor has now shown the world what Iran can actually reach. And what Iran can actually reach includes Central Europe, US, ships positioned 3,000 kilometers away, and NATO bases across the Eastern Hemisphere. A 4-year-old girl is seriously injured in Israel. Dimona has been targeted for the first time. Somewhere in the Indian Ocean, a US warship is sitting at the coordinates where it shot down a missile aimed at a base that was never supposed to be reachable. And Trump's 48-hour ultimatum expires tonight with Hormuz still at 0 transits and no sign that Iran intends to open it. There has been speculation for years that Iran possessed capabilities beyond its stated 2,000-kilometer limit. Analysts suspected it. Intelligence agencies tracked it. Nobody could prove it. Friday morning was the moment Iran chose to prove it themselves. They showed their cards. And the hand they were holding is bigger, far bigger than anyone in Washington planned for when the first bombs fell on February 28th. Before you go 3 questions, and I want to hear from you in the comments, Iran just demonstrated missiles that reach 4,000 kilometers, the same distance as Central Europe. Do you think Iran will now target European cities or NATO bases if this war continues? The man who imposed Iran's 2,000-kilometer limit was killed on the first day of this war. His successor just fired double that range. Was removing Khamenei the single biggest strategic miscalculation of this entire conflict? And Trump says winding down while Israel says escalating significantly. The 48-hour ultimatum expires tonight. Hormuz is at 0 transits, and Iran has just shown it can reach things nobody thought it could reach. What happens when Iran does not reopen the strait and Trump has to decide whether to bomb the power plants? Drop A, B, or C in the comments right now. I read every single one. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because tomorrow may be the most consequential day of this entire war.